Greetings, everyone. Kendall and I decided to join forces and do this episode to post across both of our podcasts. So whether you're listening on Becoming Who We Are or Anderson Alchemy, thanks for joining us for this Halloween special where we'll be discussing spirits and death. Not as something spooky and dark, but as the natural, sacred rhythm of life. Kendall, I'm excited for this conversation. How's it going?
I am too. Thanks for the great professional intro. And I love that. Join forces. It's like we're going to conquer the world together.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because, when you talk about death, you got to join forces and...
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very triggering, very heavy subject for a lot of people. So it can, just be triggering. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So did you have any ideas about where you might want to start, or you want to just get right into it?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of say, like, I was delivering some food the other day, and I saw this lady's her yard, and it was full of skeletons and a graveyard and all the things,
Yeah.
And across the street there was a yard with the same thing. And she opened the door. I was like, "Are y'all having like a battle to see who has the best decorations?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Who's winning?" She's like, "Well, me, of course." And it was just so funny, but it got me to thinking about, like, the time of the season and growing up Christian and kind of how I was raised to view it all. My church actually, we did have, like, we called it a fall festival, and so we kind of like turn it into our own thing. I know some churches don't celebrate anything, and some do normal, and some people would come to church in like stuff like like a skeleton or a goblin or something like that. But
yeah,
so it wasn't. I didn't have like the most strict, but also it was definitely like viewed as potentially evil or dark, demonic, that kind of thing. So I think there's a more nuanced way to think about it. And so,
yeah, for sure. I can remember in one of the last churches that I was kind of plugged into, I remember a whole conversation about which costumes were acceptable and which ones were not for the children, because it was a fall festival. Of course, they weren't celebrating Halloween, and they had to, label it fall festival, but, costumes were allowed, but, they didn't want anything, I guess, too spooky or scary. And so there were some rules and guidelines around that. It's kind of, I think it's really, really different for people coming from a Christian perspective, because it really skews what the holiday is really all about deep down, and kind of just spins it in a way that is really not helpful. I think it makes, it makes it seem dark, or it makes death seem dark or spooky, or people fear death anyway. And so when you kind of spin it that way, it's just really not helpful, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we're all honest, we all fear death to some degree, and I think that's natural and that's okay. But I definitely think that if we can get accustomed to doing rituals or thinking about death, then it can help lessen that fear and help us prepare us to welcome that when it comes, and to see it as a transition rather than from a physical perspective just a really terrible thing that we all have to go through.
Yeah, I 100% agree, because, death is it's a cosmic mystery. And I think that really creates a lot of fear, because it is so mysterious. People fear what they don't understand, and we really don't know. Even if we have a good idea or think we kind of know what happens after we die, no one really knows. And so, not to mention impermanence. Like, we spend our lives resisting impermanence. We don't want to, we don't want to give in to the idea that everything, every moment is impermanent. We want to seize control. We want to feel secure. But life is always in flux. Everything in this physical realm, everything within time, is passing away. And I think, we think death is the opposite of life, but life really has no opposite. The opposite of death is birth. So within this world of form, impermanence reigns, and birth and death are just 2 points along one continuum that we call life. And so, I think when it's framed properly, it's a lot less fear-based. But because people don't really talk about it a whole lot, and it's just kind of shoved into the corridors, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around it.
Yeah, that's another good point. And my mind goes to like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I think, did you read that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't actually read it, but my point is that society and cultures, groups used to have more of rituals and focus on death to help prepare people, and some of them viewed death as life as preparation for death and for what comes after. So it's a really intriguing perspective. And today it's so, like you said, shoved into the corner and like not talked about. And you think about funerals, and a lot of times they'll really uh have caskets and they'll close it, and some people have it open, some people close, and they'll dress the person up so they don't look so dead. um and I was listening to Ram Dass and talk about India and how like they have this place where they just stack bodies and people go by there all the time, and it's just so, it's a part of everyday life. And to us that sounds so morbid, and even to me, of course, it's so weird, but it is a part of life, paradoxically. And some people, and actually my church group did, growing up, we did like go to a cemetery, and I think it's a good ritual to do, and it can even be like peaceful in a way, a place of like rest and quiet, and um kind of this existential exercise in realizing our impermanence in this life, and to treasure the moment. What is that phrase, that amori fati, or like seize a day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Memento mori.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the one.
Yeah. Remember your death. And so, yeah, we should live, our lives with death really at the forefront, because that's the doorway into an expansive journey of becoming whole. Nobody gets out of this life alive, right? I mean, we all pass through that doorway. So instead of ignoring it, we should be facing it with equanimity instead of like shoving it into the corridor so that it becomes something fear-based. And we even use euphemisms like you were talking about, like in India, where, the bodies are out there on display. People walk by them. People are confronted with the reality of their mortality, which I think causes people to dig deeper, to do their inner work, and to sort of reconcile some things in this life before they cross, which that is the point of this life, to reconcile those things. But here in the Western world, so often we're just caught up in our, really privileged lives that that we're not facing those things. We use euphemisms. We don't even like to say die. We say passed away. And like you said, put makeup on and dress people up so that they don't even look, dead. And, people will go, oh, they look so natural, look so alive as they were, laying there. But the whole point is, should not be to try to look as though you have not died, but to face mortality. Right. That's, I think the healthier way to process it.
Right. And when we can think about death, it helps us think about the spiritual element of life, and realize that storing up treasures for now in this life is not gonna do much for you. You can only take inward treasures to the next life. And so it's just a reminder to play the infinite game rather than finite game.
Yeah.
Just really help realize there's a whole another world or dimension, and or dimensions out there. And this is just one little part of life. So really, it can even take some heaviness or seriousness, kind of the Alan Watts "Life is a Game" kind of perspective. I think that you can go too far in that direction, but you can also go too far in taking it too seriously or too heavy. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because to live with balance, kind of that middle way, which is the way of Jesus, really, is that middle way where you don't go into the ditch one way or the other. Like you said, take it too seriously, become too identified with the world of form. That's not healthy. And then alternately, to become complacent. So it's about living in a balanced way. It's about being balanced and reconciled in this life so that we can fulfill our purpose, right? The question, what happens when we die? I get that a lot. Considering that I wrote a book, Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Afterlife, almost every interview, is always, so, well, what happens when we die? And I think it's because, people really deep down, whether they know it or not, they're really wrestling with that question.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are just whistling past the graveyard. They're not actually asking the question, but deep down, there's that existential angst, that we all feel on some
Mm-hmm.
level. And I think it's really not healthy, to just ignore that and to not try to reconcile that while we're here. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, probably mostly unconscious, but unconsciously, people are probably partly celebrating Halloween and, what Christians consider even the dark a lot of times to help them explore that or reconcile that or feel through that. And, I'm not going to say there's nothing, there's nobody that's doing, demonic things or messing with that. And it's not darkness, but again, can we have a nuanced perspective and see the good and see that it's one of the few times where we really confront and wrestle with this? And you know, it's kind of funny because in like one way, it's people are doing candy and just like I was talking about my interaction, they're just having fun. And so one way it can be like, hey, we don't have to make death so heavy, but it's also something to take seriously and to wrestle with that. So I can, on one hand, see how like I appreciate people making light of it, and can they also take that question and explore that in a serious way as well?
Yeah, that's a really good point because, the actual holiday, Halloween, was Samhain in the Celtic calendar. And it really, because it's the time when the veil is the thinnest, the veil between the spiritual and the physical realm is the thinnest. And so Samhain was all about honoring ancestors, holding space for the dead. So they weren't making light of at all. It was more of a welcoming. And because that time of year, they believed that, like I said, the veil was thinnest. So they felt that they could have more interaction, more communication.
Mm,
In fact, trick-or-treating springs out of that. People would leave food and drink offerings on their porch for the dead. And then in time, the poor children would come to to those porches, knock on the doors, and I think they would offer prayers maybe for the dead in exchange for those soul cakes. So that's what trick-or-treating kind of sprang out of that. So yeah, it was all about honoring the dead and holding space for that, the sacred in that moment.
mm,
So yeah, and I think in our modern minds, we do make light of all of that. And while I agree with you that it's good that we could have fun and not take life too seriously, but at the same time, I think we kind of get off the tracks and just go way in the other direction. Also, Halloween is often not for everyone. I realize not everyone's doing this, but by and large, death is framed as dark or shadowy
mm, mm-hmm,
through
mm-hmm,
through the holiday of Halloween. Even if you're not really into dark things, you would consider a haunted house always malevolent. Ghosts are always
mm-hmm,
kind of scary and evil, when in
mm.
reality, we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, right? Spirits are around us continually,
That's a
perpetually.
good point.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think it would be helpful if people could engage with it in a more balanced way and just see that there are evil spirits, but there are also benevolent spirits.
Y- yeah, yeah, and I just think of that Rumi quote about like beyond good and evil, there's a field to meet you there, and how we can really think dualistically and like good and evil, and um, Christians can really try to stay in the light and shove away the evil, and there's a good side of that, but then there's also like we have to do our shadow work and we have to confront the evil of the world and in ourselves, and Halloween can be an invitation to look inward and to do that and see what's going on and deal with that, and not just project that onto the external world, that like that it's not a part of us, it's part of something else, and that we're trying to stay in this kind of like religious OCD of like keep it away from me.
Yeah, that's beautiful, really, because this time of year for me, I do kind of follow that Celtic calendar that I was talking about. And so for me, this time of year is a time of going inward, which, I mean, we should always be, kind of practicing mindfulness and doing our inner work. But specifically, this season is a season of unplugging and going within and doing that shadow work. And because the veil is thin, it's not just thin between the spiritual and the physical realms. It's also thin within us, our consciousness and our unconscious. And so, yeah, it's a perfect time to, hold space for our ancestors, to welcome them and the insight that they bring us, because they are with us, guiding us along, trying to urge us into our highest life path perpetually. And so, yeah, it just is a time to honor them, honor that, the presence in our lives that is kind of, always with us, whether we perceive it or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're never alone. We have lots of help, and we have many people who've gone before us, ancestors and others, and we can look to them. We can look to God, we can look to Jesus, and we can look to them. They're all part of our team on our side, and that's encouraging. And we can also honor them. You were talking about Jesus earlier, and I was thinking about like a couple of times where people died, and a couple of times Jesus or once he was like, "Oh, they're not dead; they're asleep." And they're like, "What?" Or he would just do some things where he would. I think what he was doing was he was trying to transform someone's perspective and seeing death in another way, and seeing that it's not so permanent or final or it's exactly the way they thought. And of course, we have the resurrection himself, but also said that a lot of people arose with him as well. So we see that death is not so permanent, and the spirit is eternal in all of us.
Yeah, I love that. And Jesus comes and he eradicates death, right? Death, it's not the end. It's just a doorway into an expansive journey of becoming whole, right? We all pass through that doorway, but resurrection waits on the other side. And I guess, that's where people kind of it gets convoluted. Like, what happens when we die? And I think, like I said, I get asked that question a lot, but I think it's important to understand what life is in order to understand death properly. Or what we call life, like physical existence. And, I'll just preface what I'm about to say by saying, in my view, the body does not have consciousness, but consciousness has a body. The way I would frame it is to say there is only one mind, one unified field of consciousness. So one universal mind, and everything else is just mental processes within this one field of subjectivity. And what we call the physical world is just an expression of mental processes that we perceive as tangible and concrete from our limited perspective. We're viewing things from the outside. If we could live from the center instead of the surface, the world of form would just completely dissolve. So basically life, or physical life, is the result of a fragmented mind. It's disassociation, really. And we see it in psychology in extreme forms like dissociative identity disorder, DID. And what we think of as ourself is just a mental process disassociated from the other mental processes that are unfolding in that one field of perception. So life, as the physical life is disassociation, simply put. And if that's true, then death is just the end of disassociation.
Yeah, it's so funny that we think that insanity is where we aren't grounded in reality. What we consider reality is physical reality. And certainly if you don't see the perspective of physical reality and live in that, you're going to have issues. But you're also going to have a lot of issues, and we are disassociative and have many issues because we're not also seeing the perspective of being eternal spiritual beings and living in that world as well. And that's what Carl Jung is so great about pointing out. The cause of our mental illnesses and all our issues stems from the lack of spiritual fulfillment and living from that perspective and that understanding of our true identity.
Yeah, because we live as though there is just the physical realm. Even people who profess a belief in spirituality, like, I know Christians who would say that they believe in heaven, which is a spiritual plane of existence of some sort. And while it may look different for each person, everyone kind of processes that in a different or a subjective way. overall, people are living as though the physical realm is all there really is. And that's really where a lot of Christians have their hope, because they're really banking on heaven coming to earth, like being embodied. And I've heard people say, oh, well, there's a banquet, when Jesus returns. So we're in physical bodies, we get to eat. So they're really just worried about the physical aspect of life. And so I think they're
Mm,
missing the metaphorical and mythological components in the story. And really is so much more. It's so much more than that. This physical realm it's the lowest realm of existence. And so whatever resurrection is, it's definitely a higher dimension. It's definitely exponentially more than anything we could ever think or imagine. And so it's very short-sighted, in my opinion, to get so bogged down in the material, in physicality.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting because Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is in the future, but it's also now. And
Mm,
so I think that, so many spiritual people say live in the now. And it's kind of like live in that eternal now moment in of the spirit, and live in time in the physical.
yeah.
Um and then I do think there is a time, and we're in the process of the renewing that, Jesus began or really made a big transformational leap of bringing the kingdom of heaven on earth, and that's going to continue. And maybe there'll be time where we do transcend the physical here on earth, and what that looks like and how that's going to be, who knows? But we definitely don't want to get caught up in just like waiting for that to happen. We have to live our lives now, and we I believe that there's a reason why we came to the physical earth, and there's lessons for us here to learn, and so we need to embrace that and live that out.
Yeah, I agree, because it really is, all of life is designed to awaken us or bring us into our highest life path. And really, this physical realm, because of that tension of opposites, right? It's a world of duality. It's because of the suffering that it is perfect for our learning and our evolution. Without that friction, we wouldn't grow. It's like the trees that are grown in the biodome. They don't have wind or resistance, and so they grow really tall really quickly, but they don't develop stress wood. And without the stress wood, they're uprooted. And the
Mm,
same is true for us.
mm-hmm,
We need that tension of opposites. We need that suffering, and nobody likes that, to actually grow. So yeah, I
mm-hmm,
think, the physicality is important because it allows us to evolve, but also we need to hold it loosely and not become so immersed in it, so identified with it. We need to sort of see through it, into the
mm-hmm.
spiritual realm, see what's really real, because what is seen is supported and sustained by what is unseen. And I think that's what, the scriptures mean when they say Jesus was in the world, but not of the world. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so we
Mm-hmm.
need to be the salt and the light. We need to make a positive difference in the world, and to live out our purposes, but not cling to the physical.
Right. Yeah. Spiritual people talk about like ETs, or just other spiritual beings, and them looking down at humans on Earth and being so fascinated, and being fascinated and also like perplexed, fascinated and like, wow, what is this physical existence, and even admire us for just choosing to come down here and live, in this heavy energy, and admire us for alchemizing, but also like we get so lost in it, and forget that we're also infinite spiritual beings, and um in love as well. And so I think there's both the reminder of that, and also like the compassion and love we can have for ourselves and each other, in going through this, and know that it's going to um yeah, it's gonna be worth it. It's
Yeah.
hard to say in the moment, but it's gonna have lasting fruits, you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I know I often say I don't want to come back. I hope I learn my lessons, and I don't have to come
Mhm,
back again. But, we make that decision from a higher vantage point. Our higher self makes that
Mhm.
choice. And, as you know, I don't know if some of the listeners may not know, but I have sustained communication with my grandmother and other loved ones through the veil with the other side. And, that's one of the questions, or that's one of the things that kind of comes up a lot, is like, I wouldn't want to come back here. It's so difficult while we're immersed into it. But we make that decision. And my grandmother tells me it is always a choice, but we're making it from that higher vantage point. So, yeah, I mean, while we're here, it's hard to say. And
Mhm.
everything is kind of veiled. And even if we're doing our inner work and trying to awaken and are, in some regards awakened, no one has fully arrived, of course. Even then, we don't see the full picture. And when we do, we see, I think it's like an unfolding. It's like gradations, even a spiral. We've talked about that, you and I, Kendall,
Mhm.
where it's like we circle
Mhm.
back to certain lessons and we see them with fresh eyes as we kind of,
Mhm.
graduate along. So I think it is just a gradual unfolding, kind of a gradual unveiling, so that we can see what's really going on.
Mhm. Yeah. I think and I get the sentiment, and like I'm sure well, I do feel the same way to some degree, but I think the more we are like, I hope I don't come back, the more it shows us we haven't learned our lesson, and like we have to become equanimous with life, and
Yeah.
and be okay with coming back, and then we're probably ready to not come back.
Yes. Yeah, I was just thinking about that today because I was reading in A Course in Miracles, which, there's a daily lesson. That's kind of what I'm doing, the workbook section where you do each daily lesson. And it was in the lesson, it was like, I will hold no grievances, or I will hold on to no
Mhm.
grievances. There are no grievances, something like that. And of course, in our finite human existence, the grievances galore, right? So, and I was thinking about that today, and I'm like, the fact that I am annoyed, the fact that I am thinking I wouldn't want to come back, or gosh, this is just the worst, or whatever, that in and of itself is proof that I have not arrived. That's why I need to be here, right? So it's kind of paradoxical, and it's funny, if you stop
Mhm.
and think about it. But in the moment, it can be, I don't know, it can feel so heavy and so intense. And I think a lot of people, really struggle, being incarnated for that reason, because it is so heavy when you don't see through it. And it's so easy not to,
Mhm.
because it's so pervasive, right? Everything is so tangible and concrete in the physical realm. It's hard sometimes to see into that spirit realm, to see the truth uh, beyond all of this that's kind of pressing in on us.
Mhm. Yeah, I again, like I said, I've been listening to Ram Dass, and been really thinking about like desires, and um, even though we're like, life is really hard, it's really heavy, we're also so addicted and have
Yeah.
so many desires within the physical, and then spiritual people like, oh look, I've become spiritual. I don't have physical desires, and now they have spiritual desires. I want this spiritual experience. I want this, and I've been all the places,
Yeah.
both sides of it. And again, equanimity is being okay with what is the spiritual and the physical. Um, and I think that, like, going back to Halloween, something like that shows us, are we equanimous towards that aspect of life. Um, I remember when I was young, I saw someone who was demon possessed, and it was pretty intense. Um, but even before that, I was like, I used to read Ted Dekker books, and there was like serial killers, and there was one, and Frank Peretti too. There was some about like demonic possession, and that stuff fascinated me. And it was kind of my time period in life where I really was exploring. And I remember, like, after that experience with someone possessed, I was like looking at YouTube videos of people, and it's not that I wanted that I was attracted to the darkness. I just wanted to understand it, and I think it really, and I definitely think there's a danger in getting lost in that darkness, and just seeing the darkness of the world, and um or being attracted to that stuff. But I do think there is a value if you can do it rightly, in understanding that, and it can even create compassion and empathy for people who are so lost in that, and where they're coming from, and why that is. And I even think about like haunted houses, and um I don't love getting jump scared, but some people love it. It is like a shot of adrenaline. It's kind of like, I'm alive. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what Halloween is all about. It's all about that, the jump scares and the horror films and things like that. And yeah, it's funny because I had someone invite me to Pope's Haunted Farm. I don't know if you guys have that where you are,
Hmm.
but yeah. And so
I did a haunted woods once. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Or you go through a hayride and walk through a
Hmm.
cornfield and people come out with chainsaws and I'm like, "Oh, no, no, thank you." And they're like, "Well, we thought you'd be all into it." I was like, "No, see, I like legitimately haunted, like my, houses that have like legitimate spirits in them that are not trying
uh,
to traumatize me. See, that's the thing. My grandmother would never, attempt to frighten me or jump out with a chainsaw or anything horrific like that.
uh-huh.
That truly is the theatrics of the physical realm, right? And
Uh-huh.
which I do realize that there are spirits that are malevolent and that would be
Mhm,
frightening.
mhm,
But I truly believe that a lot of it has to do with, like you were saying, people who are so cut off from it, they're ignorant of it. And so it's more frightening. And I think those certain entities feed off of fear. And so it's in our
right.
fear and that unknowing that it kind of perpetuates, evil in that sense or evil, demonic type, you know, I don't know, events, perhaps,
Mhm.
because if you're not afraid, then there's no fuel in that. And so I feel like they would just
Right,
leave you
yeah, it's kinda
alone.
that paradox, so, like, the people who are most worried about that kinda stuff are attracting the most demons into
Yeah,
their energy.
right.
And one thing about, like, haunted houses or stuff like that, in a way you could call it see it as, like, exposure therapy. Be like, "You know what? I'm more used to this, and so it's okay. I can handle it more, and I'm less afraid."
Yeah. I don't know though. I don't know if you could get used to some of that stuff that I mean, it's just so
Mhm,
yeah, so frightening. And and I'm not saying that, if if I saw a demon step out of the dark corridor that I wouldn't be frightened. But I do
mhm,
believe in my own experience of what I know of the spirit realm and having been exposed to it and not just like closed it off as something frightening that I don't want to engage
mhm.
with. I have more balance in that respect. And I feel like I could go into it with mindfulness. Not that I wouldn't initially be frightened, but I feel like I could practice some mindfulness and reel it in and sort of hold that equanimity within that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. And I can say that because I've had that experience of someone who's demon possessed. And because I had read that stuff beforehand, it wasn't as extreme for me. And I was able to handle it better than even other Christians that are around me who, you're a Christian. So you're supposed to believe in this stuff and you're supposed to believe that it's real. But it just wasn't as real to them. It was like, oh, this distant thing you read in the Bible from the past.
Yeah.
And once it became real to them, it was really hard for them to like digest and handle. And I was like, yep, it's part of life. And, it was definitely intense, but yeah, it makes a difference for sure.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a spiritual realm, spirits around us all of the time. And, some maybe, have not so great intentions for us. Like I said, a lot of them feed off of energy, like lower vibration type energy,
Hmm.
fear and worry and that type of thing. And so, really and truly, you could just be shopping in Walmart and pick up an attachment of some sort. Not that it might linger; it might just follow you for a time and then leave you alone. But you notice sometimes your attitude just sort of really shifts, or you just suddenly feel out of sorts, angry for no reason, that kind of thing. Sometimes there is a spiritual component to that
Hmm.
type of thing.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think we should just live with an awareness and a mindfulness that there is a realm swirling around us all the time, affecting us in ways that we probably, aren't even aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, I get the question a lot, what happens when we die? And like I said, I believe that life is dissociative disorder, basically, disassociation. And so death is, the disillusion of that disassociation.
Mm.
And when we incarnate, there's like this constriction of awareness where we zoom in and become identified with the physical realm, with our bodies, with our egos, that type of thing. And then when we die, there's an expansion of awareness. We zoom out and we see reality as it really is, which is a huge growth opportunity, really. We reconnect with our higher self, our unconscious awareness. And basically, we become exponentially more than we ever thought we were. And we see with clarity, so much so that it can be super painful. If we lived relatively cut off from ourselves or, heavily identified with that ego self, then it can be really, really painful. It's like waking from a dream. And so the dream is the disassociative state. And when we dream, we identify with that dream avatar and not the whole dream. Even though we are the whole dream. I mean, really, we're producing the entire dream, right? But we don't experience it that way while we're dreaming it. We just identify with the one character in our dream, the dream avatar. And then when we wake up, the dream avatar dies, but then we still remember the dream, once we are awake. Well, sometimes we do. We don't always remember our dreams, but you have a more expansive view once you've awakened. Like you can see it for what it is. You realize, oh, that was just a dream. And you realize that, that none of it was really reality as such. And that's what death is. It's full clarity. And knowing that makes me want to be a better person. Like it makes me want to come into alignment and do my shadow work before I cross over, because I think it would be particularly unmooring and painful to cross before doing, a lot of inner work.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're confronted with your full self and your life review afterwards, and you hadn't started that process, it's very big shock, and you could say, quote unquote, kind of a hell experience. But the more you've done your shadow work, the more you're like, yeah, I'm familiar with it, and I've learned to have love and compassion towards myself, and learn to continue working on myself to improve on that in the future. And so yeah, you're more ready for it. And there's people who have near-death experiences or like awakenings, and it's like, man, these experiences felt more real than, quote unquote reality, physical reality. So I think that those experiences can help us realize that this is a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot, I know some people who they really are into, NDE accounts. Like they watch all of the videos and listen to all of the people talking about that. There are actual podcasts who really, they're just about nothing but NDEs. And I've been a guest on a couple of them actually, not because I've had an NDE, I haven't, but because I've, have sustained communication with the other side. And, it's really fascinating to me because people, they find a lot of comfort in that. Because people, when they share those NDEs, most of them, not all, but most of them, it's all just love and light and peace. It's a very comforting way of framing things. It's like, oh, it's just like you're just slipping off an old shoe or something. You're just sliding into something more peaceful and serene. And from my vantage point, I would say, while some of those people are having like out of body experiences, which would be what I would call astral projection. They're just sort of getting a view of the astral realm from outside of their body. They're still viewing the physical realm, though. They're able to like recount what the people were saying, what they were wearing, that type of thing. And some people are having it's more of a psychological projection onto the fabric of reality. They're sort of having the experience they need to have, kind of like psychedelics. And according to my sources, NDEs are just not what death is really like. They say it's like being in the waiting room, but not actually going through the corridor of death.
It's a little taste, but not the full reality of it. But I guess my point is, I guess that like even that little taste, and whether or not it's a full reality of what after death, you can still feel that it's more than this reality.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I mean, not to discount it at all. When I framed it that way, I think that NDEs are important. And I think that people have the experiences they need to have. And so it's, like I said, it's a psychological projection, but that's a good thing. It's like some people have hellish experiences. And I think if they do, it's because that's the experience that they needed to have in order to bring them into their highest life path. Kind of like psychedelics, they give, like a minor taste of death. They suppress the brain activity. And that's the same thing that's happening with NDEs. The brain activity is suppressed. And so people have particularly lucid experiences on psychedelics, sometimes life-changing. And same thing with NDEs. It can be unmooring and terrifying, or it can be glorious. but whatever it is, often those people, it leaves an indelible mark. Those people, their lives are changed for the good. People, really turn their lives around, live from love. And I think that's the prevailing point of all of it, is to center us in love. And that's what I hear when people share NDEs most often, is that it made them be a better person. It brought them more into a loving awareness.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I used to read like one near-death experience every day, and it always made me feel really good. And um, I think there's every once in a while someone will have just a dark near-death experience. But I've read there's a lot that are may start out dark, and then they were transformed into like a place of light. And so that's really cool because that's not very traditional Christians, what Christians think the afterlife is like. It's like one or the other. And it makes me think of like when it talks about Jesus going down to hell and rescuing people from there. And there's lots of accounts of people encountering Jesus and him helping them. And yeah, it helps people live in love, and see from a bigger perspective. And yeah, it's very helpful.
Yeah. People see Jesus, and then some people see the Buddha. I mean,
Hmm.
people,
Yep.
they kind of have everyone has their own subjective experience. And that's what I meant.
Right.
Like, it's your own psychological, material
Hmm.
being projected out, which is a good thing, because then it's subjective and it's what you need for your own
Hmm.
evolution.
Hmm.
And so I think
Hmm.
that's why NDEs are so important. And,
Hmm.
while they may not be what physical death is truly like, they offer something in the evolution of consciousness,
Hmm.
and kind of evolving people along, for sure.
Yeah. I will say I've noticed that a lot of people who identify as Christians before their near-death experience um believed in spirit guides and reincarnation after their experience. And so that was really cool and really helpful for me at a point in my spiritual journey, and just like confirming those things.
Yeah. Reincarnation really was a game changer for me. I
Hmm.
know that was not part of my worldview coming from a
Hmm.
Christian perspective. Not that I was opposed to it. I mean, because for me, truth is paramount. I just want the truth at
Hmm.
all costs. And so I'm not attached to any particular theological doctrine, is I guess what I'm saying. But I really just hadn't explored it very much or given it much thought. But when my grandmother pushed her way back into time and space, that was one of the first things she communicated that really wasn't a part of my worldview. It was that reincarnation is true. And so, what I've come to see is that it really offers a more expansive view of reality.
Hmm.
And it really highlights the grace of God. Like, we're not given this one short life to get
Mm.
everything right. We have multiple incarnations to come into alignment. As the grace of God is front and center in that reincarnational worldview. So for me, that, and also the problem of evil comes into sharper focus. I mean, it's not as much of a problem when you see things through a reincarnational lens.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of that like an expanded view of universalism. It's like everybody, and in the end will come into the oneness of God. And um it's not on our shoulders to save the world and save people, and just by embodying the love in God, we're transforming the world.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, that really is what it's about, right? Just coming into alignment and living from love. Jesus said it, love God, love others. That's really that simple. But we just get so entrenched in this physical life that we miss that point. And yeah, I think if we were to live with that memento mori, where we were, remembering our death, aware of our mortality in a more balanced way,
Hmm.
I think we would live from love. I think that really we would have more grace for others, if we lived with our mortality front and center,
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
because none of us are getting out of this thing alive, and everybody's grave is the same depth, right? So,
Hmm.
and none of
Hmm.
us can take any of this physical stuff with us when we go. Love is the only component that lasts ultimately.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's beautiful.
Um, I read a really great book called Death by Sadhguru.
Mm-hmm.
And I highly recommend that to anybody who's kind of thinking about death or mortality or really wanting to dive into that a little more. It's just a real balanced way of of processing death. I don't know if you listened to him ever.
Yeah, I've seen clips here and there, and he's got some good things to say.
Yeah, yeah. He talks about his wife and how, and I forget the word for it, but in the Hindu culture, there's a word for sort of raising your vibration to a certain level that you would leave this physical plane of existence. And people talk about masters that have
Mm-hmm.
dematerialized. I've heard people
Mm-hmm.
talk about certain people just dematerializing.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that. His wife was wanting to do that and working toward that when they were a lot younger. They had like younger children, and he tried to talk her out of it. He goes into it all, and he's saying that he was trying to change her mind because they had small children, and he didn't want his wife to leave also because he loves his wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she was just adamant, just very determined that, she felt like it was her time. Like she had learned her lessons. She had gotten to this point in life and she was ready to go. And so he talks about how it was during a certain meditation session. She got up and went to the bathroom. And then she came back and sat down on the cushion. And then shortly after, she slumped over. And when they checked, she was just gone. She was, like not there, dead, for
Wow.
lack of a better word. And he says that she accomplished it, that he went in the bathroom and her jewelry was in the bathroom, that she had taken all of her jewelry off. And then she sat down on that cushion knowing that she was about to go. Anyway, I thought that was super fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. That is intense. That's really crazy. Yeah, it
Yeah,
makes me think of like Elijah, ascension, or even Jesus, after his resurrection, his ascension.
yeah,
And, rather than think of it like being taken off to heaven in the clouds, it's more of like we know, transcending the physical body and going into deeper dimensions. Um,
yeah,
and Yeah, absolutely possible. There's lots of accounts about that, and even some like gurus who kind of um just kind of like left when it was their time rather than like died as we think about it. And I wonder sometimes like my dad had a best friend who just he just died in his sleep. And I just wonder if sometimes things like that happen if it was just that person's time.
yeah.
So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I guess, for me, my question was that if you do reach that state where you become a high enough vibration that you transcend the physical, wouldn't your physical body cease to be?
Mm,
Like you would just sort of
mm,
dematerialize.
mhm,
And so that was kind of where I was wrestling with it because some of
mhm.
those masters that, there are accounts of, stories of these, these masters who vanished, like
Right.
body and all, just
Mm,
gone. They started to shimmer or whatever. They
mhm.
talk about, like a shimmering light on their
Yeah,
skin,
yeah.
and then they just dematerialized. Now, like I said, Sadhguru says that his wife slumped over and she had
Mhm,
left her body. And
mm,
to me, that would be that's sounds like death. And
mhm,
I think that's something different. And in my communication with my grandmother through the veil, that is something different. She tells me that I forget the word for it, and I regret that I don't have the actual name for what
mhm,
it is. But yeah, like Elijah, walked with God, and then he was no more. That kind of thing is
mhm,
just a dematerialization. The body is
mm.
just gone.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
good difference. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
And one thing you talked about is like I think that and we can see this in like Middle Ages paintings like the halo or like even the golden glow. You could say like as people get into very high spiritual states, very ascended masters, they start to have this their aura becomes apparent to everyone
oh
and have this sort of glow. And makes me think I like went to this energy retreat and came back and my mom's like, I don't like your eyes. They look different. I don't know if they stay. I don't think they stayed like that, but there's something about that, the energetic transformation,
yeah,
probably that Kundalini rising kind of
yeah,
thing that makes a physical difference and transforms your body.
yeah, for sure. Because we are all entirely energy, right? And
Hmm.
so yeah, it definitely it's from the inside out, I would say. Because really, what you see manifested in the physical is just an expression of what's happening on that subtle spiritual
Mm.
plane of existence, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely think, you even hear people, even if it's not something spiritual, you hear when someone's happy, it's like, oh, you're glowing. There's
Mm.
a radiance about the physical manifestation. So, yeah, I definitely think if it was something to do with a shift in consciousness, you would definitely be able to intuit it in physically. You would be able to pick up on it physically. And I think some people are more intuitive to those kinds of things anyway. Like they feel energy
Mhm.
more deeply. And so they would,
Yeah.
yeah.
I read this this, or not read, I listened to one podcast, this lady who grew up Christian, and she heard spirits voices in her head from a young age, and she thought she was like, cursed, like she was hearing demons all the time, and she grew up and she was like, oh wait, I'm a medium.
Yeah.
And now I help people like cross over. So really,
Yeah.
really fascinating.
That is fascinating. And I think, it's a gift. Some people are
Hmm.
just born more. I think any of us could cultivate it, but I think some people are just born a little more open
Hmm.
to it, for sure. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess we've covered everything we come here to say. So,
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thought we covered a lot of different things and covered it well. And hopefully this helps people who are thinking about Halloween and death and everything.
yeah. 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 Happy Halloween, everyone.
Yeah,
And
happy Halloween.
thank you all for joining us. And as always, cosmic blessings and peace.